The impossible escape from Alcatraz. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 men vanished from what was supposed to be the most secure prison in America. To this day, nobody knows for certain if they survived. Alcatraz Island sat isolated in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water, powerful currents, and a reputation that kept even the most dangerous criminals in line. The prison held men considered too violent, too cunning, or too much of an escape risk for anywhere else. Officials called it escape-proof. The cold water alone, they said, would kill anyone who tried to swim for the mainland. Frank Morris didn't believe that. Morris had a difficult start in life. He grew up largely without stable parents, moving between foster homes as a child, and by his early teens he was already in trouble with the law. Small thefts became bigger crimes, and by the time he was an adult, he'd built a long record that included burglary and narcotics offenses. But what made Morris different from most inmates wasn't his criminal history, it was his intelligence. When he was tested at Alcatraz, his IQ score came back well above average, high enough that psychologists at the time noted he was smarter than the vast majority of people who ever passed through the prison system, staff included. He wasn't reckless. He was patient, meticulous, and had already broken out of at least one other prison before he ever set foot on the island. Officials who eventually pieced together his escape plan later admitted that if anyone in the history of Alcatraz had the mind to actually pull it off, it was Morris. He wasn't alone in his plan. He teamed up with 2 brothers, Clarence and John Anglin, both serving time for bank robbery, along with a 4th inmate named Alan West. All 4 were housed in the same cell block, and all 4 began working on something almost unthinkable, a way out. The plan took months. Using stolen spoons, discarded saw blades, and a homemade drill fashioned from a vacuum cleaner motor, the men slowly began carving through the ventilation grates at the back of their cells, the same grates that led to an unguarded utility corridor behind the cell block. Every night, under the cover of noise from a nearby accordion one of them had been given permission to play during music hour, they chipped away at the concrete, hiding the growing holes behind cardboard vents painted to match the wall. To fool the nightly guard checks, they built dummy heads out of soap, toilet paper, and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop, placing them in their beds so it would look like they were sleeping soundly during head counts. Behind the walls, in that hidden utility corridor, they built a makeshift workshop. Using more than 50 stolen raincoats, they constructed a crude inflatable raft and life vests, sealing the seams with heat from a stolen steam pipe. It was slow, dangerous work, done almost entirely in the dark, with the constant risk that a single guard walking past at the wrong moment could end everything. By the night of June 11, 3 of the 4 men were ready. Alan West's hole wasn't fully cleared in time, and he was left behind. Morris and the Anglin brothers slipped through the openings, climbed the utility corridor to the roof, and made their way down using a makeshift rope, before slipping into the water sometime after 10 p.m. And then, nothing. No confirmed sighting. No bodies ever found. No trace of the raft. When guards discovered the dummy heads at the morning count, the prison alerted the FBI immediately, and what followed became one of the largest manhunts in the country's history. Investigators combed the bay by boat and helicopter for weeks, dragging sections of the water and searching nearby islands and stretches of coastline for any trace of the men. The Coast Guard was brought in to help map the currents, and experts were consulted on how far a person could realistically drift given the water temperature and tides that night. The search turned up only fragments. A few weeks in, investigators recovered a homemade paddle floating in the bay, along with pieces of the raincoat raft material. Later, a wallet belonging to one of the Anglin brothers, wrapped in plastic, washed ashore. Photographs believed to show the men, taken years later in South America, occasionally surfaced and were investigated by the FBI, but none were ever conclusively verified. Family members of the Anglin brothers have claimed for decades that they received cards and letters after the escape, though none were authenticated as genuine. Officially, the FBI's case remained open for 17 years before it was formally closed in 1979, with authorities concluding the men most likely drowned in the frigid, fast-moving currents of the bay. But no bodies were ever recovered, not one. And that absence of proof has fueled decades of speculation, sightings, and rumors that Morris and the Anglin brothers actually made it across the bay and disappeared into new lives. Alcatraz itself closed permanently the following year, in 1963, partly due to the enormous cost of maintaining a maximum security island prison. To this day, the case remains one of the only unsolved prison escapes in American history, and the only successful escape ever recorded from Alcatraz. So the question still stands, more than 60 years later, did they drown in the bay that night? Or did three ordinary men actually outsmart the most secure prison in the country and vanish without a trace?